Thank you to Skylight for sponsoring part of today's video and inspiring it. Hello brains, it's that time again, back to school. And that's actually probably true whenever you watch this because we go back to school on a regular basis. From winter break, spring break, weekends, and every single time it seems like the transition can be really tough for people with ADHD. If you have ADHD, if anyone in your family has ADHD, the back to school transition can be really, really rough because you're not used to these routines anymore. So I thought it would be cool to do a video about making that transition back to school. There are some things that you can do that I've learned over the 8 years that I've been doing this channel that can make that transition a little bit easier. But these are the tips that I found are pretty consistently worth the effort of implementing, or at least trying. So first of all, have a family hub. This is actually really, really important because it makes it so that one person in the household doesn't have to hold all of the information for everybody in the household. Having a centralized location where you put all of the information that everyone in the family needs to know in order for that week or school year or whatever to be successful is really important. And you can do this in a couple of ways. There's an analog version, which could be a whiteboard. It could be a cork board where you put up notices. The key is to put it in a central location where everybody in the family can see it and to try to keep it updated regularly. Have a mandatory weekly meeting. What is your schedule? What is my schedule? What's our kids' schedule? When do we get time together? When do we get time alone? What are we doing for meals? Having that meeting on Sunday makes Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday go so much more smoothly because you're not realizing, oh shoot, soccer practices today on a Wednesday. You knew about that on Sunday. You might remember it on Wednesday, but ideally you'll have already thought ahead and prepared. Having that meeting is really important because people with ADHD tend to miss things, tend to forget things, tend to be time blind, forget that we need time for things like alone time or downtime. It's a lot easier to do any sort of transition when you know what to expect, when you know what's going on. So putting that in a place where everybody can see this is what our day looks like, this is what our week looks like is really, really helpful. Skylight is a digital version of the Family Hub that I personally use, and I love it. If I add something to my Google Calendar, it also shows up in the Family Hub. So whoever is in my home who's looking at my calendar can already see it. I don't have to update it twice. You can track everybody's schedules. You can track to-dos, what everybody needs to do for chores. My daughter is too young to do chores, but she has a childcare provider who comes and takes care of her at the house, and I can assign her chores, which is really nice. She looks and sees what she needs to do for that day. I don't have to remember to tell her. I can just put it in Skylight and forget it. I've talked about Skylight before, but it actually is a new feature that makes meal planning easy, which is huge for me. You can go and just quickly add what you're doing for the meals for the week. And there's a recipe box that comes with ideas already for like what you could eat for breakfast, what you could eat for lunch, which is already helpful. But you can also add your own recipes and then put in the description whatever it is you need to know in order to be able to make that food for yourself. This is game changing for me and a lot of people with ADHD because when you're in the middle of a busy week, a busy school year, it is really tough to figure out how to even feed yourself. So being able to plan that once a week just ahead of time is going to make that transition back to school a lot easier. If Skylight sounds like something you're interested in, they actually give us a code for $40 off 15-inch Skylight calendars. This is available globally, and I will link to that in the description below. The code is HowToADHD40, like $40 off. Again, I'll link to that in the description below. So that's one. Have a family hub. Have like one source of truth. This is like what's going on with the family. This is what's going on for dinner, and everybody can kind of be on the same page. But moving on. 2, ADHDers tend to have a lot of sleep difficulties, so mornings can be really, really tough. Having a Launchpad by the door where people put whatever it is that they need to take on their way out the door the night before is really helpful because then you don't have to worry about trying to gather all your supplies in the morning. My mom had a rule that as soon as homework is done, it goes in your backpack and your backpack goes by the door. I didn't always remember to turn in my homework, but I did have it with me when I got to school. If you don't already have a Launchpad and you have a few days or weeks before school starts, this is a really great time to set one up with backpack hooks, with a bench, with a shoe rack, whatever it is that you personally need. So the Launchpad is one station, right? It's the where stuff goes when it's gonna go out the door station. Another great thing to do is set up a homework station. A lot of times kids with ADHD, even if they do really well in school, even if they do really well on tests, struggle with homework really hard. People with ADHD generally do really well with cues, visual cues especially. When I'm sitting down in this place, that means I'm supposed to be doing my homework, which makes the transition into doing homework easier because our brains are kind of helping us with that transition by going, oh, okay, when I sit here, I do homework. If I have to get up and go get a pen or go find a highlighter or whatever, there's a lot of stuff that I can get distracted by around the house. But if everything is at my homework station, I don't need to get up and go do those things. I can stay there. If it's a dedicated space kind of away from the main trafficked areas in the house, there's less for us to overhear and engage in and get distracted by. So it's not that it has to be a super quiet zone. It's distraction free as possible so that we can add in the level of stimuli that we need to be able to focus rather than getting pulled away by a stimulation that is not helpful for us. Have a rule. If you're sitting in the homework station, you're doing homework. If you are starting to do something else, leave the homework station so that it kind of stays sacred. 3, color coding. This was actually something that I learned from my daughter's daycare. Every kid has a different color. Their bins are marked with that color. Their cabinets are marked with that color. That is a really great way to make it easy to tell what belongs to what kid. If every kid has a color and anything you need for that kid has a color on it, that makes it really, really easy, not only for you, but also for them to be like, oh, I'm purple. That backpack has purple on it. I'm going to grab that backpack, right? But there are other things you can do with color coding too. One of my favorite is a cup system from Brendan Mahan. Brendan Mahan is an ADHD coach and educator who taught me about this one. And it's a really versatile one that you can use for a lot of different scenarios, but my favorite is for homework, where you have a series of cups. There's a green cup, a yellow cup, and a red cup, and you stack them. And whatever cup is on top is a signal. Let's say you're doing homework or your kid's doing homework. If the green cup is on top, it means I'm good, I'm fine. Even if it looks like I'm staring out the window, like I don't need help, I got this. Yellow on top means I'm struggling, but I can keep going on my own. I could use some help, but I can keep going if I need to. And then red on top means I'm stuck. I actually can't keep going until I get some help. Color coding is one of the most helpful and underutilized, I think, strategies for ADHD. There's all kinds of different ways you can use color coding. I think the key is to keep it simple, 1 color per kid, or 3 colors with the cups situation. If there's just a few colors, then it's a lot easier to remember what the system even is, which brings me to the next tip. Make sure any organizational systems or strategies that you're using are ADHD friendly. And often that means simple and easy to remember and easy to use even on a bad brain day. One of the most challenging things for people with ADHD is consistency. There are some days where we can really hyper-focus and do really elaborate things really quickly and really well. And then there are other times where we walk in circles because we don't know what's happening. That was me this morning, keeping the system simple. I fell into this trap so often when I was in school of setting up these really elaborate systems at the beginning of the school year that would immediately fall apart 2 weeks into the school year because the amount of time and energy I could put into it before school started was very different from the time and energy I could put into maintaining it once the school year started. And the same is true if I'm doing something on a Sunday, setting up for the week. I have time on Sunday. I don't have time during the week to go that in depth. I might be able to alphabetize my books on a Sunday. That is not happening during the week. I'm not going to be able to do that. Books go in a bookcase. Like that's it. That's about as much as I can handle during the chaos of a week. If you're not sure if a system is ADHD friendly, we actually built an ADHD friendly rubric. I'll link to that in the description below. But yeah, generally speaking, systems that are ADHD friendly are systems that are easy to use, fast to use, rewarding to use, fun to use. So things that are maybe tied to a personal interest are going to be systems we're more likely to use. Systems that are flexible too and error tolerant. If your system requires perfection and consistency, that's maybe not going to work long term for somebody with ADHD. Another way to make going back to school easier is to figure out your routines in advance, both your morning routine and your nighttime routine, because your nighttime routine is going to determine your morning routine. If I don't have a nighttime routine that involves me putting together an outfit for the next day, then my morning routine involves scrambling to figure out what the heck I'm wearing and sometimes realizing I don't have clean socks. Having a nighttime routine that supports your morning routine is, I think, really important. Sleep Sleep, sleep, sleep is part of this routine, right? If we're on break, we're able to go to sleep later, and it's really tough to go from going to sleep at midnight to going to sleep at 10 p.m. I talk about this in my book. I have a whole chapter on sleep, but one of the things that the sleep expert that I talked to had to say is that you want to transition that a little bit more slowly if you can. If you're on a weekend, try to keep your bedtime relatively consistent to what it is during the week and your wake time. But if you're coming back from a summer and your bedtimes have been much later because you didn't have to go to school at all for months, adjusting your sleep times incrementally by like 15 minutes at a time is a lot more realistic, because then you're not lying in bed at 10 p.m., not at all tired because you're used to going to bed at midnight. Getting up and ready in the morning can be really, really difficult for people with ADHD for a number of reasons. So having a morning routine that either is pretty short or can be condensed is really important for us. Making sure we're able to wind down for bed and wake up in the morning at fairly consistent times is really, really critical for anyone with ADHD. But there's a decent amount of research on specifically ADHD and sleep in kids, and even a 30-minute departure from our regular bedtime when we're kids has a pretty significant impact on our executive function, and it becomes this vicious cycle. If you go to sleep and wake up around the same time every day, that alone is going to support your executive function and help you perform better in school. Establish communication with the teachers ahead of time. This is definitely for when you're entering a new school year, but it can be really helpful to talk to teachers ahead of time if you know that there's something that you struggle with or that your child struggles with, because then when the issues arise, the teacher knows why these struggles are happening and they don't assume bad behavior. If you're in school or your child is in school and you need formal accommodations, in the United States, there's something called a 504 plan. There's also IEPs, but most people with ADHD would typically get a 504 plan. I talk about that in this video. There's a lot of different accommodations that can be put in place for kids with ADHD in school. And putting those accommodations in place ahead of time, even if you don't think you need them, is a really good idea. You want to put them in place as early as possible so that the support is there in case you need it. If one person in the household is struggling with ADHD and going back to school, everybody in the household is struggling with ADHD and going back to school. So whether you're the one struggling or your child is, I hope these tips were helpful. The tips that I shared are very tried, true, time-tested tips, but I know that the community has a lot of really unique and interesting ideas that have worked for them individually. So if you have anything like that, please share in the comments below. I would love to hear what you do to make your transition back to school easier for yourself or your child. Thank you to my brain advocates and all my Patreon brains for supporting what we do here at How to ADHD and making school transitions and life, hopefully in general, easier for those with ADHD. Oh, and thank you to Skylight for sponsoring part of this video. Like, subscribe, click all the things, and I will see you next video. Bye, brains!